General Cavoli, General Venovos, thank you both for your appearance. General Cavoli, you've been asked on occasion to include by the chairman's very first question about the lessons that other nations might learn from Ukraine, like China in particular, if American will falters. I agree with that because we underpin global stability and security. If American will falters anywhere, then adversaries everywhere will take lessons from it. But one thing you haven't gotten asked about is what's happening right now in the Red Sea. An outlaw gang of brigands and rebels is shooting at U.S. Navy vessels on a routine basis, dozens of times now. Now, fortunately, our air defenses have intercepted those. That's the only thing that stopped our sailors from being killed. Yet all we're doing is shooting down those drones and missiles in the air, or maybe when they're on the launch pad. What lessons do countries like China, or for that matter, Russia, learn when we just let our sailors sit in the Red Sea and become sitting ducks for an outlaw band of rebels?
Thanks, Senator. So to be clear, that's not my area of responsibility.
Not your area, but you commented, Chairman Reed, that people outside your area take lessons from what's happening there. So what lessons do people in your area take from the fact that, again, we're doing nothing?
Sure. The lessons that European nations are taking from this.
That Vladimir Putin is taking from it.
Well, I don't know what Vladimir Putin's taking from it, sir, because he's got his hands pretty full right now inside Ukraine, where he's learning some of the same lessons, right? If
the lesson is that President Biden can be deterred from taking decisive action to protect our interests. For 2 years, he pussyfooted around and didn't provide Ukraine what it needed to stop the invasion earlier and to roll it back, and now we're at this unsatisfactory moment in time. Okay, let me come to that. So Ukraine's a pretty big country compared to some countries. It's small compared to Russia. Some people say, like, well, Russia's always going to win. Russia always wins because Russia's a big country. Is it the case in history that smaller nations always lose to bigger nations?
No, it's not the case, especially if the smaller nation can make sure that they accomplish their objectives in the fight quickly. I think over time, as we see in history, as we see conflicts get protracted, typically that favors the larger nation.
I agree. That's why it was such a terrible mistake for President Biden to pussyfoot around for 2 years and not provide Ukraine the weapons it needed when it could have had a decisive advantage. But it's not even the case in Russia's history, right? Russia lost the Russo-Japanese War. Russia lost the war in Afghanistan. I guess you could say Russia won the Winter War against Finland in 1939 and 1940, but it got very little for an extraordinarily high cost. So it is not the case that just because you're a bigger nation, you're fated to win a war against a smaller nation. But as you say, you've got the smaller nation has to be more nimble and aggressive, maybe take risks that it otherwise wouldn't. One thing that Ukraine needs to do, therefore, in my opinion, is conduct more strikes against the facilities and the sites and the resources that Russia is using to wage this unprovoked war of aggression. So, for instance, General Cavoli, what's the military value of striking refineries on Russian territory for Ukraine?
The military value of that is producing a deficit in fuel available for the fielded force, that is for the combat force, someplace downstream of the strike, right? So there's a time lag in its effect, Senator, as you well know.
And the military value of, say, of striking drone factories on Russian soil?
Yeah, the same. It has an effect. It is a downstream effect, but of course it has an effect.
The military value of striking the Kerch Strait Bridge?
That would have a downstream effect that took effect sooner.
Okay. The administration has urged Ukraine not to launch these kind of strikes, though. In your professional military judgment, would Ukraine be more likely to win or at least get a satisfactory outcome in this war if it was striking those sites and other sites that right now are safe haven for Russia's military?
So I think Ukraine would be very well advised to strike the operational level targets that are supporting the fielded force. They have some urgent challenges right now on the front line, as we've spoken about. The fighting is active along the forward line of troops. And so those things that contribute most directly, that have the shortest downstream effect right now, I think should be struck. Kind of feeding the wolf closest to the sled, I think, is what they need to do right now.
Is it your military judgment that we should provide Ukraine with more and more variants of the ATACMS missiles than we have already?
It is.
Okay. One final question on this small and large point. It's been reported that Russia has about a 3-to-1 advantage in artillery production right now over Ukraine. Is that accurate?
No, sir. They have a 3-to-1 production advantage over the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Ukraine and the good guys, let's put it that way. Okay, so, but isn't it also the case that Ukraine is destroying 4 Russian howitzers for every 1 that Russia destroys?
Something about like that.
Pretty big mismatch. If Russia can make 3 times as many big rounds that we all can make collectively, yet Ukraine is able to kill 4 times as many guns as Russia has. What explains that?
What explains their ability to kill more? Because the Russians are not as precise in their targeting.
So it's not just a matter of having a lot more stuff, although it's nice to have more stuff, and we should certainly have more stuff and be able to make it faster. It's also that you got to be able to use it, or to put it in simple terms, you got to be able to hit the targets that you shoot at in a timely fashion.
Of course.
And Ukraine is doing that much more effectively than Russia is doing that.
Typically, but not uniformly.
So while the 3-to-1 production advantage is unsatisfactory and needs to be reversed, it's also not a sign that Russian victory is inevitable.
There is no such thing, as you know, of inevitable victory, sir. If your question is, can Ukraine win this war? They can win this war. Can they win it without achieving Russian levels of production? Sure, they can. But right now, they're in a very critical moment.
Well, what would be best is if we achieved Russian levels of production and we maintain the 4-to-1 advantage on targeting. So let's try to get there.